Therapy Corner. And here at the Therapy Corner, what we try to do is educate, demystify, just get you to become more aware of all things that are psychological, psychotherapy, counseling, all that. And today we have a very special guest. We have a gentleman all the way from Israel. And this is Roni Maislish, and he is a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist working in Israel. And he's going to join us today, and he's going to talk about the emotional aspects of obesity. Okay, we're not talking about eating disorders here per se. We're talking about the emotional aspects of obesity. Welcome, Roni.
Thank you very much. Great to be here with you. So maybe I will tell you more about my background as a professional, because 15 years ago, when I actually, like 18 years ago, still working in the business field, but then I read some books and I had like a spiritual, journey. And then I decided to become a therapist. I read Irving Yalom's book, When Nietzsche Wept, and something there, touched me deeply. I remember that one of my teachers, she was the head of the eating disorder unit in one of the hospitals in Israel. And I really wanted to be part of her team. So actually, in the beginning of my career, I worked in the hospital in an eating disorder unit, working with anorectic women, bulimic women, and their parents. But around the year 2007, I read this book, When Food is Love, by Janine Roth. She lived very, very close to you, I think, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And a year later, her famous book is When Food is Love. And a year later, I flew to San Francisco and I participated in a retreat of 6 days retreat. And when I came back to Israel, I really felt that I don't want to work just with the population suffering from anorexia and bulimia. I want to work with anyone who will tell me that she have an issue with her relationship with food and eating. So we are talking about relationship. It's not, it's not partly. It's a very, very holistic understanding and a very, very holistic healing processes. So most of the people suffering from, issue, problem, disease about the relationship with food and eating, having obesity, having overweight issues. And in your country, America, there's 100 million people suffering from obesity. So maybe part of me, wanting and so happy to be here and speaking about that is that I believe that there's not enough therapists who are expert in that field, the emotional aspect of obesity, the emotional aspect. When I'm speaking about emotional, it could be the addictive, psychiatric, mental, spiritual aspect of obesity. It doesn't matter which word you will use, but you got what I'm saying. It's not just the biomedical. For sure, the biomedical approach, the medical aspect is very, very important. And the nutrition aspect is very important. And the exercise and the sport aspect, for sure, it's so important. But I feel that to really change the statistic, and when we are talking about the statistic in the last 50 years, only 3%, 5%, it doesn't matter, succeed to lose weight and stay thin for 5, 10, 15 years. So I'm looking for, more and more and more professional that will want to be an expert on that field, not just to be an expert with anorexia and bulimia and binge eating disorder, but to take the huge, field disease epidemic, I don't know how you will call it, obesity epidemic, and say, yes, there is, just small words that we need to go deep, deep, deep and look inside, like emotional eating, like emotional hunger and emotional starvation, like emotional neglect, and like the psychology role of the fat. So to understand, this is, when I'm speaking with my patient, I'm telling them, for sure, there's a part of you who wants to be thin, but there's another part. I don't want to call it like you don't want to be thin, but it's a more complicated. There's a woman from she's origin from New Zealand. Her name was Joyce McDougall. She died a few years ago, and her famous book is The Theater of the Bodies. So she most of her life practiced in Paris in the psychoanalytic program there, school there, and she did a lot of work with the psychosomatic patient. So there is, the area of the disease of psychosomatic, like fibro and other disease, but she looked also on addiction as psychosomatic. So again, we're speaking about addiction, the addiction side of obesity, the overeating, the compulsive eating, of those people suffering from obesity. So I'm trying to understand what is their body theater, why a particular person arrange himself that kind of a theater of 50 pounds, gaining in the last year. Maybe he got divorced, maybe he changed his career, all kind of transition, and Corona also, it's a huge transition. Many people are gaining weight that year. It's very, normal, as I say, but I'm talking about, transitions. And again, it could be anything, and anyone, have a particular vulnerability to a particular transition. So I want to be a very, understanding and empathic crowd for that theater. So it's a paradox. That's what I'm trying to say. Obesity or overweight or overgaining or whatever you will call it. It's a paradox. In one hand, it's a problem. So we need to, I'm not in the acceptance, field. Oh, accept yourself, whatever. I'm not. So it's a problem. It's a disease. Okay. But it's something else. So I don't know how to call it, except as Joyce McDougall said, it's a body-mind theater. And then it's something else. Then you need to understand, and what I mentioned a few minutes ago, the psychology role of the fat. I'm looking with a particular person to understand why the fat was even born, maybe in his childhood, maybe 5 years ago. It doesn't matter. It's so diverse. After working in that field for 15, 16 years, it's so diverse and different. For sure, there are, some similarity of all of that. Like, I think maybe 50% of the women will say that one of their biggest fear to lose weight again, because most of my patients, it's not the first time that they are trying to lose weight. Right. So the biggest fear is being attractive. It's being sexually attractive, because last time when they became thin, they didn't know how to handle the transition, the changing, the whatever you will call it. I want to call it a transformation, because to really have, a major change in that field, in your relationship with your body, relationship with the food, your body, mind, you need to have some kind of transformation. So they become thin on one hand, but their other side, the mind, you can call it whatever, didn't have that kind of a change. So they, they didn't handle the change, and they regain their fat. And also for men, maybe it's less about sexually attractiveness, but it's it's very, very close to that because it's about being in the center. So a lot of men, when they are losing weight, they will be more in life. They will be more in the center. People will want more from them. They will be more, they will take on themselves more obligation, more duty. They will want to lead. They will want to, you know what I mean?
Right.
And if they are not ready enough to take all of that on them, it will be very, very, very hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then they will run back to their fat. So
Yeah.
I'm saying all of that to understand what is the meaning of the psychology role of the fat. It have a role. Yes.
Yeah, if I can just jump in here for a second. I teach psychology at the local college, and we talk about nutrition at certain points, and this has been already very enlightening for me because I focus on calorie intake and things like that, and nutrition, and watching calories so that you don't get fat. Because as I point out to them, you use the number of 100 million people in the United States that are obese. I have it at 35%. So whichever way you want to look at it, 100 million people is a lot of people. 35%. I mean, that's over 1/3 of the population. I mean, we lead the world, literally. We lead the world in obesity. And that's just wrong. I mean, there's all kinds of health concerns, and we need to do something about it. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation because we need to do something about it. But I like what you're saying, and I'm going to let you elaborate more on it because, yeah, I never thought a lot about the psychological, as you call it, transformation that takes place when our body changes and how we think and feel about that. Never occurred to me because I know that a lot of obese women have used their obesity as a shield not to connect with men. Okay.
Right.
And when you started talking about that, wow, that just hit right home. And I'm really appreciative of this. So thank you for coming on the show today. And please go on because
Maybe I will just continue with that example because I remember around something like 10 years ago, there was a woman, she wasn't that fat, maybe like 30, pounds, like more than she need. But she told me when she realized what will happen when she will lose weight, she will become more attractive. She told me, Roni, I'm fine like this, like this. I will stay with mine 20 pounds, 25, 30 pounds. But in that situation, I will have less, a conversation with men that maybe they will, start to speak with me. And then I need to tell that to my, husband. It's not like he's jealous, but it's like, it's an energy. I don't want this energy. So I will stay with my 30 pounds, and it's fine with me. And, I said, okay, I cannot force anyone, change, but it's very, very complicated. And I think that there's not enough, as I said before, therapists, that understand the complexity of that issue. We try, to handle it very, 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 not simple, but in a part, not in a holistic understanding. And it's very, very holistic because it connected everything almost. And I work with, for many, many years with dietitian. I was teaching like 200 dietitians in Israel in the last, 10 years. And 3 of them, continued to work with me for 8 years. And, in the last few years, I was working with, family physician in Israel. And I think, that now it's the time, not just for the dietitian and not just for the physician, that more and more psychologists, social worker, mental health counselor, professional from those professions will take the opportunity and say, all right, there are 100 million people here suffering for overweight. Maybe not all of them, the emotional aspect of obesity is interesting them. Okay, I can understand that, but maybe 20%. Mm-hmm. So it's 20 million people. So to understand the psychology reason for a person become overweight. So this is one part, the psychology reason, and bring them the psychology help, the psychology, healing process for those 20 million. Maybe it's enough. Maybe for 5 million, maybe for a million, it doesn't matter, because I feel, I'm speaking with, American professional, trying to find colleagues and friends in the last year through the LinkedIn, like I found you. And I feel that, I'm so alone in what I'm doing. And I don't want to be alone, because it's so, also in Israel, I feel alone because not enough therapists, will say, I want to be an expert in, in depression. I want to be an expert in this or that. But obesity is like, it's a huge epidemic. And you really need to understand that and go very, very deep. And I want to share, after your question, something about a research from some psychology from Wales, and I will speak about it later. Yeah,
okay.
Ask me.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say was, because you touched on something there in terms of other therapists, et cetera. And the reality is, here in the United States, we almost, I'm kind of speaking in generalities here, we have this fix me attitude. And when it comes to weight, we think, like I teach, about calories and nutrition.
Right.
So when we want to lose weight, we go to diets. We go to a nutrition or dietitian for weight loss, or a doctor for weight loss. And we don't look at the psychology of it. And again, I'm so thrilled that we're doing this. So go ahead and maybe we can get more people interested here with the show. Get more people interested with the psychology of overeating. Yeah, that would be great. So anyway, tell me about your study.
And again, I'm continuing what you just said. I believe that if more therapists will, have an interest in that field, they will attract more patients. They will more speak about that. The category will become more and more and more, enlarged. So we need to speak about that. We need to, study all of those, connection between our emotional, our sensation, our feeling, and our relationship with food and eating. We don't have enough connection. And when I did the Jenin Roth retreat 13 years ago, we did experimental work with the food itself. So in the last 13 years, I'm doing workshops both for patient and for professional. And it's not through the mind. It's not like academic, although I can, speak about that article, that book for sure. But it's more experimental work about, having those that are, asking all sorts of questions, like what is the connection? I'm talking about, I'm taking like theme, like choosing. So what is the difference between how you choose your food, in the buffet, so then how you choose your city or your country or your friends or anything, and to have the, I'm calling it the similarity or the opposite, and to really understand and to think what change in life should I do that might affect my relationship with food and eating. So if I'm choosing fast food, and I'm choosing, fast clothes in the store, in Target or whatever, then maybe I will slow down my, habits in Target, and I will see if, it can affect my, eating habits or choosing eating habits. But maybe it's different. I'm choosing clothes very, 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 very slowly, but food, I'm choosing very, very fast. So maybe I will do my choosing in the store more quickly and see if I will take another control energy to the food, and games like that. And, it's very experimental, and I have many, many themes that I can investigate, regretting and, control, loss of control, aesthetics, a lot of things that we can see how it's, how you can see it in your relationship with food and eating, then to your other relationship. But I want to tell some other, very interesting, I don't know, fact or idea or about the research from a group of psychology from Ireland, not Ireland, Wales, that they talk about that the group of emotional eaters, all right? So they believe that the emotional eaters are very, they are very close to the group of the anxiety people, okay? There are very, a lot of similarity between those two groups. And the emotional eater groups are the number one in the world or whatever to collect information. They are the best collectors of, of information. They can detect, because they are like the anxiety, that something is happening outside, inside. So they collect accurate information, they are very, very precise and, accurate. So their bottom up process is, 100%, but their top down, top down mechanism is slightly, damages because of their trauma. So when I'm talking about 15, 16, years of working, all of my patients suffering from this trauma or that trauma, it could be sexual trauma, it could be emotional neglect, it could be, emotional violence, loneliness, so many trauma and so many, hurt and damages. So because of those trauma, chronic trauma, other trauma, acute trauma, their ability to understand, to label, and to, how do I say it, to be sure that what they are feeling is the right things and they know what they are feeling, this ability is lacking. So part of, very basic, healing process with, the patient of mine is just to believe them that what they are saying, that what they are feeling, they know what they are feeling. So I need just to believe them, because if I will believe them, they will gradually trust themselves, because this article, this research from this group from Wales said that they don't trust themselves at all.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, and because of that, it doesn't matter, how much they're, detect, fully what is happening. They don't know what they are, detecting or they are feeling or sensation. They don't believe themselves, so it doesn't matter. So there's not integration between their bottom-up process and the top-down. They call it, how they call it, interoceptive processes. This is the kind of word. So this is very interesting for me. What is that group of the emotional eaters? What they are lacking? What is the connection between obesity and emotional eating to trauma? And it's not always, I was, before our conversation, our recorded conversation, we speak about my 10 years working, my first 10 years working as a psychotherapist, trying to help patients to be more aware. And I felt, like 2012, that it wasn't enough for their healing process. And accidentally, or there aren't accident, and that year I switched my supervision to a psychologist that she's practicing self-psychology of course. If you heard about self-psychology, I can show here the last book of self-psychology, How the Analyst Cure, and this is the man who is, was in charge of this approach, Scott. So for me, it's like transition to another profession, being a self-psychology psychotherapist, because it's not about awareness. Awareness can be part of that, but it's not a mandatory for healing. So, caught speaking about empathy. So, empathy, it's not sympathy and it's not compassion. Actually, it's not a feeling. It's a way of, how you live your life. It's your ability to be in your patient, shoes, or see from his eyes, stuff like that. So can you, learn that in, in a school or from an article? I don't know.
Well, I can speak to that because my program was existentialism. We were humanistic existential psychotherapy, and that was the biggest thing, was the interpersonal relationship, the empathic relationship, the understanding of the other person, the validation of the other person. So but unfortunately, there's not very many existentialists out there.
Yeah, so maybe I want to go even more than that, because I think when you're talking about two-person psychology. Like it's very, we are two in the room, stuff like that. As I understand self-psychology, they go one step ahead, that there's Roni. If Roni is in the room, so there's no empathy. Empathy can exist if Roni went somewhere. He dissolved somehow to the patient, if you follow me.
Right.
So it's like, it's not a one-person psychology, but it's more about oneness.
Right.
Okay. So I practiced that, psychotherapy in the last 10 years, and I feel that this is my mission, and to heal, more and more people through that, approach, connected that to emotional eating and, obesity cure. And I, talking about self-object, when I'm succeeding being a self-object to my patient, they don't understand most of the time what is happening. And they're not aware of, a lot of, processes, but they feel more strong in themselves. They feel more joy in their life. They feel more quiet. And if, those kind of changes occur, they have less tendency to lose the balance. And then they will need less food to get the balance right, if you follow me. So through those kind of, healing processes, I help them to eat much less emotional eating and lose weight. But it's a long process. It's not a magic, as you understand. It's not dieting for sure. It's not pill. It's not surgery. It's not running marathon, stuff like that. It's something else.
Yeah. Well, clearly it takes work and dedication to the process and a willingness to do that, because it's not a quick fix. I hear that very clearly. And this is part of the problem that a lot of people here, especially in the United States, because we have a quick fix culture, I believe. We want the quick fixes, why we so often run off to big pharma, as we call it, pharmaceuticals, drugs, to fix us quickly, because we don't want to spend a lot of effort on it. And that's the shame of it, because what you're talking about does require work. It takes a commitment. But I think this is like when in class, when I teach about nutrition and dieting and things like that, and I say it's not about dieting. It's a lifestyle change. And that takes a dedication and a willingness to do that. And that's what I'm hearing you saying. Amen to that.
Exactly. I wanted to say something, but then, the train of thought took me somewhere. I don't know where. Maybe.
Well, let me get you restarted here. One of the things I know is that you run workshops, and some of these workshops are actually for therapists.
Right.
So maybe you can speak a little more about, what you go through in the workshop for the therapist, because many of the people that watch my show are in fact therapists. So what would you do with therapists in a seminar group or whatever training?
So it's depend. It's like, if it's like a 1-day seminar, or it's like, 10 session of seminar. If it's like, continuing, so I can take every meeting and divide that to 3 parts. The first part can be more about theory. So I can, work with my presentation. We can read article, researches like I mentioned, some book of self-psychology and emotional eating. The second part is more experimental work. So I believe one of my assumptions, I don't know if I'm right about that, that there are some therapists that, going to become an expert in obesity from the body-mind, approach can touch them in their issue with food and eating. So it's not that easy as a therapist to look on the, because what I'm saying, something like, if you have like issue with food and eating, so it's like it's also a psychology issue. So it's a person, it's a therapist that is willing to look, through himself and look on those area. So the second part of that kind of a meeting is working through and have like a discussions and have what I said, experimental work with the food and other exercise, like working with couple about emotional starvation. And one of this drill is when I'm asking you, so Ole, what are you really hungry for? And you answer me. What are you really hungry for? And you answer me. Like for 2-3 minutes, and we can go deep, and to see they're more soothing, calm inner answering arising, very slowly. And the third part of that day could be, supervision. So everyone bring, one of the patients suffering from, emotional eating, overweight, obesity, and we can discuss, and understand the relationship between this therapist to his patient. So this is, part of what I'm doing. It's sometimes when, it's different because I can work with therapists, psychotherapists. So I have groups for, psychology, social worker, and mental health counselor. I have groups for doctors and nurses, and I have groups for dietitians. So it's like, it's 3, division. But again, I'm very interested in your country to work with psychologists, social worker, and mental health counselor, because I believe that this group must deal with that epidemic and take more responsibilities to cure, many patients as they can. So if I have just one day seminar, so I just try to to stack it, all of that in like 4 hours, 5 hours, something like that. I think we need 4 hours to start, to really that the people, that the therapists will feel that they took something from that seminar.
Okay. Well, I thank you for that. You said something there that caught my attention, and I thought of a couple of people that I've heard over the years, and I don't want to misquote them, but one of them talked about casting a stone into the water and creating ripples that will go forward. And I know that, like Mother Teresa down in Calcutta, when she was confronted with how many people there were to take care of and was asked, how in the heck could you deal with all these people? She said, one at a time. And what I'm hearing you say is you're casting that stone, you're throwing it out there and saying, hey guys, we can fix this, but we got to get you guys on board with it.
And again, the word fix, for me, fix, it's like it will gone.
Yeah,
someday.
Yeah. Bad choice of
word. Israel is also, facts, fast changing, and we are, very close to your beliefs and your agenda. Yeah. But it's a lifelong, not struggling, because I really believe, and I can see that people that are building their own subjective spiritually path,
yes.
Their is changing. Their life is changing. for the better.
Yeah.
It's not disappearing, the issue and stuff, and it's not, but it's
I think that's a
different.
good place to stop, because it's a very positive outlook, and I appreciate that. And yes, we need to keep that positive outlook going. Roni, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I know it was an ordeal here because you're in Israel and I'm here in California, and it's a lot of miles between us. But again, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you. Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm just going to close out here. Thank you again for coming to the Therapy Corner, and I hope this was beneficial to you and in going forward with your lives. If you have suggestions for any future programs, please feel free to contact me, and we'll do what we can to get them on. Going forward, take it easy, stay safe, and have a good life. Goodbye.